Namaste, welcome to Urban Chatterati. Today I have with me a very special guest, Vikram Sood sir, who was the chief of the research and analysis wing and has written several books of late. One of them is The Ultimate Goal: How Nations Construct Narratives. So, welcome to the show, Vikram sir.
Thank you very much, Abhinav. And
Thanks a
it's
lot,
a
sir.
pleasure to be on your show. And we look forward to a discussion that probably will give some idea of what the whole game is about.
So,
So I'll
yep,
let you
yes.
begin.
So we have seen in the last few years that how the coverage about India has gone from bad to worse. I always say that India has always been presented in a negative light over the past century in the Western media and academia. But what we are seeing over the last few years is something I think unprecedented. Somehow India is the bad guy now, if we go by their academic coverage or by their media coverage. And in the past few months, when India has been helping out the world to fight back against the coronavirus, in fact, India is the only country fighting against the virus and also the source of the virus. But suddenly, instead of having a positive coverage about India, the one which is standing against the Chinese expansionism, one which is supplying to the world the corona vaccines, suddenly the discourse is all about farmers protest, how India is suppressing farmers, and how democracy is under threat in India. In fact, India is no longer a democracy, India is an electoral autocracy. So, sir, what is happening around us? What is this new narrative which is coming in over the past few years?
Actually, Abhinav, this is not a new narrative. It's an old narrative coming out in a different form, probably more visible, more vocal in many ways, because the means of spreading the narrative are much most versatile. So I take you back to the early days of our independence, and it was I was a young fellow then at school, and the narrative was used to be poor India, beggars on the streets, cows roaming around, and then the usual title at the bottom: Hindus worship the cow. You know, that kind of narrative. And Taj Mahal, three things, four things. There was only one English newspaper. There was only All India Radio. There was no Doordarshan. So the 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 whole narrative was constricted in a manner of speaking. And then we were in the socialist camp, and that was evil. The Cold War was on, and we were in the wrong camp. So we had to be put down. On the one hand, the Congress Party, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, everything was fine, erudite people, all that sort of thing. But you were poor, you were in the other camp. And that line continued. And even when we started our economic reforms, if you remember, in the 90s, we had a tough time on our dealing with Kashmir. We were fighting a battle. Our men were dying. Terrorists were running amok, and we were being pinned down for human rights abuses. You know, uh, there is a mindset that works on these lines, as it were. That we must keep these guys down. The other thing is, and this is happening now, particularly after 2014, that they've always felt, the West has always said nationalism is an evil word. Okay, so long as if it is American nationalism or British nationalism, that was fine. But if the Egyptians talked of nationalism, they would raise an Islamic front to counter that.
Yeah.
Okay, they did it in the Middle East generally. Wherever there were nationalist movements, they would put up some candidates from the Muslim Brotherhood or something. They did it in the Arab Spring also. So this narrative about nationalism in our country has to be toned down, has to be suppressed. The nationalism in India means Hindu nationalism. Hindu nationalism means majoritarianism. Therefore, it has to be put down. Because there are other things linked to this. When you talk of Atmanirbhar, when you talk of Make in India, what does it mean economically to them? At a time when their economies are collapsing, we're supposed to be the consumers. 1.3 billion are supposed to be the consumers, not producers, damn it. You're not going, if you're going to compete with them, then it's hitting at the you know at a very fundamental point. So that is one aspect. So we are useful if you want to deal with China, but we are not useful if you want to compete with them on economic issues. You can do a bit of a thing, but you can't be a producer challenging their. After all, we have 1.3 billion consumers potentially of education, of insurance, of any goods that they sell,
Social media as well these days.
even social media. So it's a huge market. They want us as a market, as a resource. They don't want us as a competitor. So greatness to us will not come by asking, by it will not be gifted to us. It's not charity. We have to work for it. These are the kinds of obstacles we will get, and we have to fight these obstacles and look at the system, how it functions. 90% of the Western media is in private hands, corporate hands, big hands. They actually determine policy to a great extent. You put it together with massive think tanks like the Council on Foreign Relations and other think tanks who have a lot of uh, uh, heft in the system. Other major think tanks, and then you have the revolving door. Okay. U.S. State Department today, think tank tomorrow, back to some other think tank or into the industrial complex, and back to the government again. So that's the net that is there. We don't have that. But we have this problem that if we are going to be self-reliant in an international market, in an international world, then that's not acceptable. No wonder they don't want to talk about COVID, our pharma success. Do you recall that last year there was a visitor from the United States, an Indian, who was talking about the extent of the pandemic that is going to hit us? And now we're working against that script. So naturally, you're not going to be popular. Naturally, they don't want to say that this third world country has been a success of all this, whereas we have not. So you can't talk about that.
Sure, sir.
When we got after the Second World War, when there was the victory parade of Champs-Élysées, and there were Indian troops who had fought those battles.
Yeah.
Not a single Indian soldier was on that parade. Because it was a question of superiority.
Exactly.
So that superiority, it is somebody who's challenging and establishing a status quo. There's China on the one hand, and there is perhaps India on the other hand. Now you can deal with China on ideological grounds, on all those sorts of grounds, but you can't deal with India on ideological grounds unless you prove that this democracy is defunct.
Yes.
So that is the effort.
Yes, sir. And we are seeing that. So the Committee on Foreign Relations of US Senate has written a letter to the Secretary of Defense who's about to visit India. And it's a letter, long letter. They're talking about how Freedom House has ranked India's democracy as partly free now, and how in India human rights are under threat, how farmers are being oppressed, and so on. But then it comes to the point: they stop India from buying S-400 from Russia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So do you think,
That is the nub.
yeah, that is the game, right? So this is
Yeah.
why this entire propaganda on the farmers protest and the democracy. But sir, how this propaganda is built? What are the mechanisms of these propaganda percolating down to the masses? Because even in India, many people are quoting these reports and saying, well, democracy is dead in India.
Yeah, it's you can't work on these kinds of things in a vacuum. There has to be some receptivity of this message, and there could be other political reasons for wanting this message to come through. You know, now here is a party which is here is a government which is trying to do things for the people. Now, if it succeeds in 2014 against odds which many of us didn't give, never expected this result. People didn't expect the 2019 result. And now the fear is that this could be a repeat. Because what we see in our newspapers or mainline, some of our TV channels, is perhaps not fully accurate. There is this other India that is growing. There is the other India, that the aspirational India. I mean, I would look at this person, this cricketer, this young Rishabh Pant. If you're familiar with cricket, just as an example, that he has the audacity to hit one of the world's finest fast bowlers for a reverse sweep six. Normally, you do it to slow bowlers, and here is a man who does this, and that's the self-confidence. That's the desire to prove. Now, this is happening in India. I've seen it myself. I don't go out so much, but I can feel it, that people are now looking for results. People are looking for not messages and slogans. They're looking for results, and they're judging governments on performance. So there is no other way to handle this. To me, this farmers' strike was nothing but a congruence of diverse interests who had their own reasons to have let this grow and happen. It could not have happened without funds. It could not have happened without logistic support. It could not have happened without leadership. So somebody has provided all that. It's for them to find out. I don't know, but this is my experience, that you can organize a little scuffle between two groups, but to organize a riot, to organize a movement like this, to make it national, it requires a whole lot of logistic support, whole lot of money, and a whole lot of interest involved in making this a success, as the only way to discredit the government.
Hmm.
So that is the game. And anybody who thinks that, who wants a strong leadership in any country? Which world power wants other countries to have really strong leaders? They would like to have malleable, accommodating leaders. How many times have the Westerners not intervened in Latin America, in the Middle East? Regime change is a commonly used expression. So much amount was X million dollars were put aside by the US government to destabilize Iran, and they announced it. So these things don't happen by accident. These things don't happen. These are not spontaneous movements. These are organized movements.
Yes, so coming to this thing, many people have pointed it out that whenever there's a strong government in India, whether it was Indira Gandhi or whether any government, suddenly you see the revival of the Khalistan movement, and the
Mhm.
moment the government goes, is the Khalistan movement also dies out. as if the
Hmm.
taps were open and the taps were closed. And
Hmm.
many people have said that Khalistan is actually the project of the Western capitals, not as much of the Pakistan that much. They are the real puppet masters in this thing as a bargaining
Hmm.
chip against India. Would you
Hmm.
agree to that?
Throughout, if you go back and look at what was going on in the UK in the 1950s and 60s, how many Indian, you know, people, Indian dissenters had gone to take shelter in UK. There was FISO of the Naga National Council. There were a number of uh, Jammu and Kashmir types, and then um, there were the Sikh groups that emerged in 19. I think they started emerging in 1978, 79, and why didn't Canada take uh, an action soon enough to hunt down the killers of the Kanishk explosion? These are leading points. I can't say that because of this you yes, they give shelter. They say it is a democratic right of every country to allow mind you, democracy is a slogan. It's not an ideal. Democracy is a slogan which they use when it suits the purpose. But they're quite willing to deal with all. At one stage, the United States had 60 odd dictators on its side fighting for democracy against the Soviet Union. So, let's not fool ourselves. This is the real world, and the real world operates like this on interest,
Mhm.
on perceived interest, on continuance or enhancement of interest.
So, if we look at India's journey since independence, how India has been trying to construct its own narrative. What were the efforts? What were the, let's say, the tools used in the early decades of independence, and what we're doing now to have an Indian narrative in this world? Because as I feel, and many people feel, that India simply does not have any narrative, or if it's there, it has no takers in the international arena.
No, we haven't really concentrated on this. And narratives are not built overnight, Abhinav. The narratives take time, takes generations, it takes a system, an organization, a collective effort. It can't be done top down only. It can't be done by the governments alone. Then that becomes propaganda and nobody buys that. So it has to be a collective effort of the country. And that includes you and me and maybe other think tanks or people who write. But here we have the other way around. We have a situation where the prime minister visits a foreign country and our journalists go down there to bring that, uh, to criticize the government. You know, I haven't seen any American come along with the US president to India to run down his own country, writing from here. So we provide a diplomat once said that we read only the English newspapers and we send it home, and that's our opinion. So that's where it gets built. You have given there is a ground for which they can plant the seed.
Mm. So you're
I'm
saying,
not saying I'm not talking about this as anti-nationalism. People may genuinely believe in what they're saying, they probably do, but it is that's how the system works.
mm,
So
yeah. So in
we
fact,
have to.
in the recent years, we're seeing that certain ideas and ideologies, like that India is not a country, or that Hindus are a fake people, they worship fake gods, that Hinduism is not a religion. All these ideas were there, they were at the fringe. But in the last few years, we have seen they have become mainstream. So you have these university students coming giving speeches during CA rights that India is just an administrative entity, it's not a country, it's not a nation, and we want our political deal with India. So we don't want rights in India, we want rights from India. And these things are getting wide support from a section of liberal intelligentsia, not just the far left, but also, let's say, the
mm.
people who are in the mainstream politics. So, what is happening out there? Are we losing out on the narrative within India itself? This nationalistic narrative that nationalism is good, that India as a country has a legitimacy? Because we often see these things becoming popular and popular.
I'm not sure whether I have the right answer for this, but I do know that we lack a sense of pride.
Hmm.
We have not invested in our heritage adequately, no? Because who wrote our histories? And what were we doing from the 11th, 12th century till the British came? Where were our universities? Where were our colleges? What happened to Nalanda, Takshashila? They all went away. What was replaced? We don't know.
Yeah.
So, and the British gave their version of history to us. Naturally, I mean, it's the hunter who writes the story, not the hunted. So they gave us the stories, and we had no sense of history. We sort of lost it somewhere, and that has to be built. We haven't done it properly. So unless you take pride in your heritage, remember your history adequately, learn from it, only then you can move forward. No?
Hmm.
We can't move forward in a vacuum. What were we? What will happen to us, and what should we be? So history is a lesson. It's not a millstone.
Hmm.
Heritage is also not not retrograde step, but just remembering your past. How good, how capable, how universal you were. So, and there is no harm in taking pride in that. I mean, there is even a story whether Alexander actually defeated Porus or not.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, actually, the story, the version is that no, he lost. That's why he left.
Hmm.
He just left his horse, Biophilus, I think. After whom the village Baflias is named in Kashmir
Okay.
on the old Mughal route. So these are aspects of history we must remember,
Hmm.
but not live there.
Yes. And do you think there's a problem in the Indian psyche itself? So if you look at the ancient history as well, so we find so many records of foreigners coming to India and writing about India. But Indians were also going all across the world. They were trading with the Africa, with the Arab world, with the China and the Southeast Asia. We somehow don't find Indian records of foreign lands even in the ancient India, when we
No,
were
we don't.
far more cosmopolitan.
Mhm.
So and even today you see Indians don't bother what is happening beyond your borders. We just don't know what is happening in Pakistan.
Mm.
Indian students or Indian universities do not study French society. They do not study even American society, which whom you are so much interconnected. So do you think there's a problem in the Indian psyche itself, that we somehow don't understand these things, that we don't know how to read other societies, or to write our narrative, or to build our own kind of history and all?
I don't know whether it's psyche, but yes, it's true that the British wrote the Imperial Gazetteer of India. You
Hmm.
might have seen those
Yeah, yeah.
volumes and volumes of each district. Everything was noted there.
Yes.
Everything, all trees, all kinds of trees, the kind of people who live there, everything. So we've been writing history of kings,
Hmm.
of invasions and defeats. We've not written history of our people.
Yes.
We've not written a history of what the Cholas did.
Hmm.
For us, history seemed somewhere to end in Bengal and start on the borders of Afghanistan, perhaps a little bit of Middle India. That's it. We don't adequately appreciate the architectural wonder that exists in India, the scientific temperament of our temples, apart from the artistic work that was done. They were scientifically constructed because we just don't pay attention. Maybe we were too poor to look after our treasures, and nobody else would want you to get get to know about this. The invaders didn't want you to eulogize your past. Obviously not. So we just learn to forget it. And now it's taking time for you. Now it is considered that you are, oh, you're a Hindu majority. You're talking about your temples.
So, sir, coming to more recent issues, like the Pakistani army chief yesterday has talked about that, let's forget the history, let's have peace and stability in the subcontinent, because that will be beneficial for India as well. It seems that Pakistan is launching a new narrative war against India, a new kind of propaganda, and we have ready audience in India. We have seen several journalists again going gaga over it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let me ask you, what are the tools or what is the mechanism that Pakistan uses to do propaganda or to build narrative against India, even within India? And how that has changed, let's say, in the last 10, 15 years?
There is, when you have empathy for a cause, you have a ready-made audience. Now you got a, a section which believes that peace with Pakistan can be attained by us making concessions. Pakistanis say, well, let's talk everything else. Let's forget the terror we did. Let's forget Bombay 2008. Let's forget Uri. Let's forget everything. Let's start again. And remember what Musharraf said in January 2012? He also talked like this, and then promptly we invited him over. And we had no, that was earlier, and we 2002, I think 2000, and we was invited, and we fated and dined. So there is this audience here which believes that we are guilty of being the larger country. Therefore, we must make concessions. We are the big brother. You see, when Pakistan wants to criticize us, they call us the big brother. But when they want to make peace, they say, "Aap to bade bhai ho. Chota bhai hi to galti karta hai." And we buy that story because I think in our inner self, we want to look good in the world. That magnanimity. Now, magnanimity is a function of victory. It is not a function of. Otherwise, it is appeasement. And that is what we've been doing. That's what they bank on. We can get through to them. And after all, how did Bhutto get away with after 1971?
Yes.
He came to India after having decided that he would make the nuclear bomb. And then he got away with everything. Because he wanted to be magnanimous. The big country, the large-hearted country. As if because we should reduce our size to suit somebody else. How can that happen? Pakistan is, I mentioned on the Twitter today, Pakistan is caught up. It will never going to give up Kashmir. It's caught in a blind alley. It doesn't know how to get out of it. It merely keeps on doing all these things to get over that.
I read that. Could you elaborate upon this thing? Because I read your tweet today. So
yeah,
could you just elaborate a bit upon this thing? Is Pakistan getting caught up in the Kashmir issue itself?
No, I mean they've thrown everything at us on Kashmir. Everything. Short of a nuclear. I mean, they've let their mullahs threaten us with nuclear bomb. But we have not given in. No government has given. No government here will also give in. And now that they find that the attitude has changed, that there will be a response to Uri, there will be a response to Pulwama. If something else happens again, there will be another response. So that avenue is closed. Kashmir is looking different on the map. constitutionally. So we're not going to give up Siachen. So what is the avenue left for them? They are faced with this FATF slap, when we slap down on them. They're faced with economic issues. So they just want to somehow buy time, get out of this, get us to talk to them. We will look good. After a few years or a few months, the whole thing will start again. By then, they have tided over their problem. Something much more must be done by them to give us belief that they have changed. Hafiz Saeed ko to pakda hi nahi.
Yeah.
So, and we don't know what has happened to this other fellow, Jaish-e-Mohammed fellow.
Salahuddin.
No. Yeah, Jaish-e-Mohammed leader. Masood Azhar. Masood Azhar. Where is he? Dead or alive? A country that can keep Osama bin Laden in their own, under their own custody, while their main benefactor was spending millions and millions of dollars to find him. Do you think it's going to give you concessions? You must be kidding.
So sir, when we talk about India-Pakistan problem, we also have the problem of Afghanistan just next to us. What is the Indian narrative with respect to the Central Asia? Because that is something which is often neglected in our discussions. What is our view about the Central Asia? How do we look at it? And what is our, let's say, long-term view? What do we want to do with Afghanistan and the wider Central Asia? Because that has always been the arena of the great game.
If you look, if you just sort of look at the map, if it were just a rectangle, okay, not all these crisscross lines, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, one single landmass. Yeah, there are two countries in the middle: Russia, which occupies most of the landmass, and there is China. Russians have huge amount of natural resources. And given the size of the country, given the location of the country, I do think that Russian US Soviet rivalry was inevitable. So regardless of ideology, this thing will continue. They don't want the Russians there. The Chinese want to get into where they want to be up to the English Channel, as it were, and beyond. And where are we going to be in this market? Yesterday, Mr. Imran Khan, or was it the day before, he said, well, if you make peace with us, we can give you routes to Central Asia. No? They don't want to buy AstraZeneca Covishield from us. They'll buy the same thing from Europe or wherever else. They don't want to buy it directly from. So we have to circumvent Pakistan. It's there. We can't change its location. We can't say we wish to be relocated. It's there. And its geographical location is its trump card with us. So we have to go circumnavigate. We have to look at Iran. We just can't ignore it. We have to, and they are also playing their game. So we have to be smart enough to play their game. Afghanistan is just an unfortunate country. We've never had any problems with them. We don't know how Taliban will be with us. That's the next government. And unless if you look at Central Asia, really, apart from the gas reserves, generally speaking, what else do they have? How much trade do we have with them? Would that trade increase if we had a route through Iran? Or would it not? So unless we've done this cost benefit analysis, unless we know where we want to be in 2030, 2040, and what the world will look like then, and we have the resources to meet those challenges. Merely saying that, we want to be there, but how do you get there? Do you have the means to get there, or are you just going to be limited to your own self? That's what they actually want us to be.
Hmm.
A country that is limited to within its own shores and also not at peace with itself.
Yeah,
Ideal situation. But a
exactly.
democracy so that they can use us when the need comes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So just to have the bargaining chips, if you speak too much, if you try to do too much, we will press those buttons like Khalistan movement and so on. So, but sir, when we look at the uh, Kashmir issue, when we abrogated Article 370, not abrogated, we diluted it, or the farmers' protest, or the CAA law, or recent this entire question about democracy and so on,
Hmm.
why did we fail to put forward our narrative forcefully in the world? Our narrative was almost completely absent on all these issues. And what can be done about it so that in the future, if something happens, we are better prepared than before?
मुझे ये बताइए, tell me, how would you spread your narrative? What are the means that you have?
Sorry?
TV channels,
Yeah.
newspapers, magazines, think tanks.
Social media.
So both अब आया है. I mean, I'm talking about the past.
Hmm.
Did we adequately use any of this? How many of our newspapers have active correspondents in countries that matter? And I include the neighborhood.
Yes.
How many? So it's, if you say that only the government should do it, then it becomes government propaganda. But I don't want to do it because it doesn't pay me well.
Hmm.
And you just publish the news that is picked up from outside.
Yeah.
Agencies have reported, an article in the New York Times is summarized and put into your newspapers, and that's the version you get. You don't get an Indian version of what's happening in the United States. How many of us have talked, how many of us have investigated and talked about Black Lives Matter? Indians have investigated and talked about it. How many have investigated about how they treated the Red Indians, the American Indians as they call them? Nobody.
Hmm.
But we have a book written on Aurangzeb by Trushka, and everybody's is, applauding that book. So that's how narratives are built.
Hmm.
आप भी लिखे किताब on what happened in the slave labor.
Hmm.
After all, the fight in the United States between the Unionists and the Southerners was not just slave labor. It was the right to own labor. That's the problem, not trade. That's all. They only banned trade. They didn't ban ownership.
Hmm.
So these are things that we haven't studied adequately enough. If somebody criticizes you, let him. You can't stop it. You don't complain about it. You write stories about them. But then you must have the means to do it.
Yes.
What is your reach? If you don't have reach outside, at least convince your own people. कि वहां भी ऐसा होता है. We don't do it
Hmm.
because if I don't know, maybe there are other reasons why they don't want to criticize the West too strongly.
Hmm.
But it doesn't happen. We don't get an adequately broad coverage. I find more articles written by Americans in America that criticize American systems.
Hmm.
I find none in India or British or wherever. I'm not just taking America because that's the biggest country around. Incidentally, it's my one of the things I keep saying. Tell me which war has America won after 1945? One, not truce.
Yeah. Can't think of any, sir.
It's still the strongest party, strongest armed force in the world.
Hmm.
It hasn't done well in Iraq at all, nothing in Afghanistan, nothing in Syria, wherever.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is still, that's the power of the narrative.
Hmm. Hmm.
You will not say, I mean, they have the powers to destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over. But the fact is, they have not succeeded in this.
Hmm.
So narratives are banayenge, to phir that's how you build narrative. You have must have the means. Corporate world is it's the corporate world, it's the corporatized private media. You know, we used to look when the news would come out on All India Radio, they would say, no, I'll read the BBC first. If BBC said it's okay. That was the image that we had at that time. So narratives banana hai, aasan nahi hai, it takes
Yeah, yeah.
time. Never, it takes a joint effort. It can't be done by you and me alone. It can't be done by the government alone. But it has to be what do you want to be at the end of the day? If you are going to be a $5 trillion economy, then you have to make your presence felt.
Hmm. So, sir, when we talk about the espionage and the narrative building, how do you see the things have changed in the terms of the apparatus, the technique, the technology when you were in the research and analysis wing, and today in the 2021? What is the change? This is the key changes in how the espionage and narrative building is done by the intelligence agencies.
I'll give you an incident. You know, when private news channels came, till certain date I don't remember. It was all Doordarshan news, All India Radio news. Then FM news started coming later, maybe. But when the private channels started working, they would give out stories as they saw, as they heard them. And once I got a call from one of the agencies, I will not name them, says, has this incident happened? I said, no, it hasn't happened. It's not true. But 2 hours later, they carried the story. So I asked him, so why? He said, no, but the other channel was carrying it also. Okay. And then, you know, the consumer started saying, this thing has appeared on the newspapers or in the TV. Why? I heard nothing from you guys. So we used to tell them, sir, we report confirmed information. We don't report rumors. They don't have to verify it. I have to verify and tell you whether it's true or not. So then that became the understanding that, you know, we're not in competition with them. But the whole game has changed with the social media and the internet world. It wasn't there when I was there. It was just beginning. We only had DVDs, we had cassette video recorders. Those were our high point techniques those days. And that's, it was, life was a lot simpler. Now I must say that the present incumbents have a huge task. I'm not sure how they're able to. I'm sure they're doing something, but something positive. But I never have asked how it is being done. But I imagine they're doing what should be done.
Mhm.
Play the game, as it were. The other thing is when you're dealing with terrorists on these kinds of things, they always have the advantage, which a terrorist organization can be quite rich. They can go in for the latest techniques without a lowest tender.
That criteria has completely destroyed every public sector work.
And you know, our financial systems have become such that the financial advisor was supposed to tell you whether you're following the procedure rightly or not.
Hmm.
But then they start questioning the very requirement.
Yes.
How can they do that? So we get caught up. Bureaucracy is at its best when it comes to dealing with new problems.
Hmm.
We hate new problems. When
Hmm.
the old is best.
Hmm.
कि पहले तो हुआ नहीं, आप क्यों कर रहे हो?
Hmm.
You know,
Same
so
problem everywhere. So, sir, final question to you. We are seeing in the recent years that what is happening in the American universities and in the British universities, basically the countries which are part of the Anglosphere, is something very worrying and very concerning. The kinds of theories, the social science which is coming from these universities, even French and other Europeans are feeling the heat. The French are calling it out as a very destructive kind of intellectual output which is coming from these countries. Do you think that India can withstand all those things which are flowing from the Western universities? Because we are too closely linked to the Anglosphere. Is it right for India to try to decouple from the Anglosphere and perhaps look at the non English speaking countries for more intellectual
no,
engagement?
I think we need to widen our scope. We need not be totally relying on a particular section of the world, and we have to look at countries like France and Germany and European countries. We may avoid Sweden for the time being, but but that's for another reason. But we have to look at other cultures, other systems. There is bound to be understanding and sympathy for us, understanding and acknowledgement, I'd say, if we are able to put across our case right. How many बोलेंगे, if we are not going to talk about ourselves, then who will talk about us? If we are not going to defend our own cause, then who will defend our cause? Nobody's going to do it. They'll say, "Tika, if that guy is not bothered, why should I care? He'll be prepared to take a beating, let him." So we have to do it ourselves. We have to push the line. And why should we be shy or shamed or apologetic about it?
Hmm.
It's my country.
So, should we also look towards China as well in the future to counter
No,
the West?
no country is out of bounds when it comes to real politics. No country is actually, you just cannot write off. You can accept a situation, you can accept that there will be problems, there are problems, there will be problems. But you have to do a sort of a SWOT analysis, cost benefit analysis, and say, "Okay, at the end of the day, will I be poorer in many ways or richer or better off?" Is I'm sure we've done an analysis about Quad and stuff like that. But will the rest of the other three countries support us if there's a hot war with China? Question mark.
Yes.
So it depends on what we're looking for ourselves.
Hmm.
And China is a huge country. It's a rich country in many ways. It's a powerful country. It's in your neighbors. You got a border problem. So you you send them a message that we will stand up for our rights.
Hmm.
And rightly so. We're not going to roll over and play dead. So I'm sure in the months of year to come, there will be a forward movement.
Hmm. Okay,
So
sir.
let's see how it goes.
Yes, sir.
There's no bilateral world anymore. It's a multilateral world. You
True.
got to
True.
throw your net wherever you can.
Yeah, the things keep changing. We are seeing that now the Indian and the Arab relations are much better than they were 10 years back. But these are the deep issues, and that it will require lots of discussion to understand the nitty-gritty of it. But thank you, sir, for talking to us, and thank you on the behalf of the audience as well. I'm pretty sure you will come again very soon to discuss on some other topic.
whenever you like.
Thank you for being a show, sir. And thank you, audience, for listening to us. And please do not forget to subscribe to the channel and also join the channel. And hoping to see you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you.